everyone, welcome back to Dungeon Brew. Today we are continuing the world building series, but I'm taking a bit of a turn from where I've been talking about the actual physical world in terms of geography and topography, because I think that there's something important that just kind of needs to be said in regard to the way that I go about world building. And cutting right to the chase, the specifics of that is that world building is something that I enjoy. So I spend a great deal of time going into the minutia of world building whenever I want to spend the time on it. And it's not always something that everyone has the time for. Sometimes it causes anxiety for people who just want to be able to put something out there or just want to start playing the game. And so what I wanted to kind of shift focus to was the idea of taking an existing world or building a world kind of off the cuff a little bit, which is something that I definitely do and have done before, depending on what my timeline is like and what my interests are like when it comes to world building. So today we're going to talk about apocalyptic events when it comes to world building in fantasy and in history. This is basically just a way of allowing you to start in medias res and have the opportunity to basically allow your world to pick up from a nondescript point in history, with the rest of that being either forgotten or unclear or mysterious, and allows you to kind of world build as you play in a way that I think that is appealing to a lot of people who are kind of on the move and on the fly and don't have the time to put in a great deal of detail at the start of their world building process. So, apocalyptic events. What I mean by this is these are basically world-changing events that alter the course of history in a meaningful way. And this isn't always an apocalypse. This isn't always the Kryn style or Dragonlance style drop a mountain on the world and there's a reset button that changes things, or the subsequent chaos war that came afterwards that changed the way that the magic system worked altogether and everyone was kind of in an upheaval. Those things definitely fall into that category, but you don't necessarily have to go along those same lines. There are plenty of examples of apocalyptic style events that exist throughout fiction and throughout our own world, and it's the kind of trope that seems to be forgiven probably more than any other. So you can also look at the breaking of the world in the Wheel of Time, the end of the First Age in Tolkien's world, where half of the continent fell beneath the sea and Numenor fell beneath the sea. You can look at A Song of Ice and Fire and kind of the long winter or the long night situation that they have, that kind of, it's this repeated apocalyptic event that kind of comes and goes and comes and goes. And then you also have things in Forgotten Realms, like the Time of Troubles, when the gods came and walked the world. And most of the time these are kind of set up in more of these mainstream fantasy style fictions as a means to reset the world and put out a bunch of new books in order to get you to buy them. But for some of the others, like Tolkien, they're definitely ones that mirror this idea of real world events that have occurred or have been rumored to occur that kind of change our perception. So Numenor falling is very much similar to our own mythological Atlantis falling beneath the sea type situation. And there are plenty of real world examples of this as well, like I said. So, and this extends the gamut of history, and it doesn't always have to be a major event in the sense that something big like disappears or is destroyed, like I was saying at the start. It can be something like the Black Plague. This had a huge effect on the way that history was recorded during the Middle Ages. So you have a situation where a sweeping plague comes through the land, a huge chunk of the population is basically eliminated. People are, the the economy is in upheaval, the society is in upheaval. There's no sense of purpose. There's the sense of the end of the world, because has God abandoned us? Because everybody is dying. What is the meaning of it all? You can definitely have things like that. So you can have a sickness or a plague that results in the end of the world, or this apocalyptic event. You can also have individuals who cause this kind of apocalyptic event, and not in the sense that it's, again, world ending. I'm just kind of using that term, but these are really significant events that change the course of history and potentially change the way that actions or activities or the goals of nations and that type of thing change. So you can have things like Alexander the Great, who conquered a large swath of land. And so you have, it's a relatively short period of time where Alexander the Great was going through and conquering through the Middle East and the Mediterranean and those types of things. And when he gets to the end of that and he ends up dying, there's a huge upheaval and there's an unrest. And there's just kind of this general confusion because the society has been disordered in some way. So it's one of those things where there's definitely the sense, there's all the history that occurred before, but the land is suddenly broken up into all of these chunks because everybody is trying to scrap and grab up what's left of his empire when it's destroyed. And this is the same thing that happened in Wheel of Time with Arthur Hawkwing, where he ruled for a period of time, conquered all of this land, and then when he died, the land went into upheaval again. Speaking of Wheel of Time, the Trolloc Wars, a major war, a major period of time in which the land is being under, the nations are under constant siege from this outside source. This results in a kind of apocalyptic event. It's something that exists, or there's tales of this and rumors of this that exist for hundreds of years after it's been finished. Those are the types of things that you can also include in your history if you're looking to just kind of pick up at a certain point. It works really well for you to kind of pick up at a point right after the events or towards the end of those events, because there's also that kind of chaos factor that occurs where the specific history of things is not quite as important as it normally would be in those situations, because there is survival, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Survival is the biggest and the most important aspect at that stage. So shifting gears again, talking about individuals, you can talk about the Christianity, or specifically the rise and fall of Jesus and the apostles and major religious events like that. Those are definitely things that have shaped history in a very significant way. Regardless of your belief system, pulling that out and recognizing the effects of something like a major prophet or a divine event of some kind, whether that's real or unreal within the fantasy world that you're creating, and how that shapes the rest of the world in the time that follows. So how much has Christianity shaped the world since, the BCE, CE era to now? And what does that look like? What does that do for things like religion, existing religions that existed for other cultures and other nations and things like that, as they slowly adapt and adopt a new religion based off of the proselytizing, based off of the prophetic. What does that do to the nations and the cultures for that world when the new belief system begins to spread throughout the land? And then the last type of apocalyptic event that I want to talk about is basically the mysterious apocalyptic event. The one that occurred that changed history, and people really don't have any record of exactly what happened or specifically what happened before it. So this is the kind of thing where an apocalyptic event is so significant or so strange in the way that it came about that it ends up creating rumors of itself and people really aren't sure. And specifically what I'm talking about in our own world is the Bronze Age collapse, which occurred around 1200 BCE. And what this is something that there are vague records of sea peoples coming and destroying like different lands and different civilizations and things like that. Modern archaeology and modern history suggests that it might have something to do with climate change and just a gradual migration out of the area. But when it comes to the way that you design this, it's really up to you what you want that to be, and you don't even necessarily have to answer that question at the outset. It's something that should be a mystery potentially not only to you but also to the players, where they don't really understand what happened. All they know is they're being picked up and put down in a world in which chaos is still kind of reigning. There aren't any major nations that still are in control of their own lands. There might be some random rulers, barons, or kings or queens in name, but not necessarily with the land or the holdings to support that, not even necessarily with the armies to support that, but anybody who can gather together a few dozen men to fall underneath their banner are sufficient enough to be able to hold their own in a world that's basically descended into chaos. And I think that this type of world building gives you a little bit more freedom in terms of not necessarily answering all the questions that you need to answer. This is the type of thing where you take a random map generator and you generate a map and you focus on a small region and you build out from there. And you're able to basically start your game at a point where something major has happened. What that is, is just look back at what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes or so. What that is up to you. But it gives you the opportunity to pick up the players, put them down in a location, and then slowly build your history and build your world as you move throughout this process. Even when it comes to things like, what do the gods look like? What does the history look like? All of those things can still be a giant question mark, because they don't necessarily know. This is a situation where somebody has seized control of the land. So the players happen to be in a region that is controlled by this random baron or baroness, and there's a couple of rumors of gods that used to exist or something like that. There's a shrine that's a mystery in the middle of town and nobody can understand it or read it or translate it. And this is kind of the idea of going, okay, so this was Latin. Nobody speaks Latin, nobody understands what it means, but it's something to do with a god. And those types of starts, I think, allow the players to really get engrossed in the mystery of what the world is. It's kind of this initial technique of basically grabbing people, pulling them into the world that you're building as you build it, and it kind of gives you the opportunity to engage in something that's not quite so tedious as the method that I tend to enjoy. Like I said, I do enjoy doing this type of world building. I've done it before, but it definitely is a situation where you kind of have to choose what's right for you, and this is an easy one to jump you into the world building process, kind of allow you to build it as you're going. And if you're using random map generators like Asgars or something else, then you can initially not worry about those larger questions such as climate and topography and geography and where your polar circles and your equators are and all of those other little granular things that I take a great deal of delight in, and build something unique and exciting for your players. Alright, so I appreciate everybody kind of taking this journey along with me on this particular video, as I'm just kind of going off in a different direction a little bit when I'm talking about world building. I hope that this was interesting for all of you, and it maybe sparked some ideas for the way in which you can go about your world building. If so, please go ahead and like the video. It helps the channel. Leave some comments down below about other apocalyptic events that I may have missed, whether in history or in fantasy fiction, to allow other people to get some inspiration there as well. Alright, I will catch you all in the next one. Dungeon